Wade Wilson sat on the beach at Dragonstone and stared at the volcanic fortress rising from the island like a black fist punched through the earth by a god with anger management issues. He'd been rowing for 3 days. The stolen boat had leaked. His supplies had consisted of half a wheel of cheese, a skin of wine that tasted like sadness, and a map that the flea-bottom cartographer had apparently drawn from memory while drunk, because it showed Dragonstone roughly 40 miles from where Dragonstone actually was. His healing factor had kept him alive through dehydration, sunburn, and one deeply unfortunate encounter with a jellyfish that he would never speak of again. His pride had not recovered as quickly. "Welcome back," he said, looking up at nothing. Or rather, looking up at everything. At the screen, the audience, sang the invisible architecture of a story that he had broken in Part 1 and was now contractually obligated to fix in Part 2. Season 2 of the Deadpool in Westeros experience. Same writer, same universe, different stakes. And if you're just joining us, first of all, go watch Part 1. It's great, I die several times and make a Lannister cry. But here's the recap. He stood up, brushed volcanic sand off his suit, and addressed the audience with the energy of a man delivering a TED Talk on a beach in a fictional medieval universe. Previously on me ruining Game of Thrones, I fell through a fire portal because Melisandre, the Red Witch, lives here, big into burning things, tried to summon a holy warrior and got me instead. I escaped Dragonstone, went to King's Landing, became best friends with Tyrion, terrified Cersei, out-creeped Varys, and short-circuited Littlefinger. Then I tried to save Ned Stark and failed because Ned Stark is constitutionally incapable of saving himself. Then I went north and saved Robb Stark by stopping the Red Wedding, which was the single most devastating moment in the original show, and I just didn't let it happen. He paused. The waves crashed against Dragonstone's shore. Obsidian glittered in the sand. Dragonglass, the frozen fire that killed White Walkers, scattered across the beach like nature's most lethal confetti. Which means the timeline is broken. Everything from Season 3 forward is different now. Robb's alive. Catelyn's alive. The Boltons never took Winterfell. The political map of Westeros has been redrawn by one guy in red leather who couldn't stomach watching a pregnant woman die at a dinner party. He looked at his hands. And now I'm here. Back where I started. Dragonstone. Because this island has 2 things I need. Dragonglass and a forge. He looked directly at the audience. Now, I read the comments. A beat. I know, fictional characters aren't supposed to read YouTube comments. But I'm Deadpool. Fourth wall is more of a suggestion than a rule. And you, the beautiful, deranged, emotionally invested people who watched Part 1 and came back for more. You told me exactly what you want. You want Catelyn to find out about Jon. You want Valyrian steel katanas. You want me to destroy Cersei with Maggy the Frog's prophecy. You want me to tell Randall Tarly that Sam gets everything. You want Daenerys not to go mad. You want the long night done right. And you want the prince that was promised to actually mean something. He cracked his knuckles. So here's the plan. I'm going to do all of that. Every single thing. Because you asked for it and because this story, the real story, the one the show fumbled in its last 2 seasons, deserves a better ending. Not a happy ending. This is Game of Thrones. Nobody gets happy. But a better ending. An ending that's earned. An ending that makes the tears mean something. He picked up a shard of dragonglass from the beach. It gleamed like black glass, sharp enough to cut, ancient enough to carry the memory of the children of the forest who first shaped it into weapons against the cold and the dead. Maximum effort. Season 2. He walked up the beach toward the fortress. Dragonstone was mostly empty. Stannis had marched his army north after the Battle of Blackwater, chasing the Iron Throne through snow and fire and Melisandre's increasingly desperate visions. The garrison he'd left behind was skeletal. A few dozen soldiers, some servants, a master who was relieved to see anyone arrive because the supply ships had been irregular and the isolation was eroding morale. Wade talked his way past the gate guards by claiming to be a sellsword hired by Stannis before his departure. The guards didn't believe him, but also didn't care enough to investigate, which was a recurring theme in Westerosi security, and explained a lot about how assassinations happened so frequently on this continent. The forges were cold but intact. Dragonstone's volcanic foundation provided natural heat, the kind of deep geological fire that had once fueled the Valyrian freehold's legendary smiths. The obsidian deposits were everywhere, jutting from the cave walls like frozen black flames. Wade ran his hand along one and felt it hum, not audibly, but somewhere in his healing factor, in the cellular machinery that kept rebuilding him from nothing, the dragonglass resonated. "That's new," he said. "That's very new and slightly concerning." He needed a smith. Not just any smith, one who understood that metal wasn't just metal in this world, that the best weapons were forged with fire and something else, something older. He needed Gendry. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. Robert Baratheon's bastard son was, and in the original timeline, rowing a boat somewhere in Blackwater Bay for approximately 3 seasons before the plot remembered he existed. But in this timeline, this broken, Wade Wilson-contaminated timeline, Gendry had been pulled from King's Landing earlier, smuggled out by Davos Seaworth before Melisandre could burn him for his king's blood. He was in the Riverlands, working a forge in a village that hadn't been burned yet, making horseshoes and plow blades and trying to forget that a red witch had wanted to drain his blood for a magic ritual. Wade would find him. But first, he had another stop to make, one that skipped. The ride north took 2 weeks. Wade stole a horse from Dragonstone's stable, borrowed, he told the audience, with the full intention of never returning it, which I believe makes it technically theft, but morally ambiguous, like most things in this show, and took a fishing boat to the mainland, then rode the King's Road north through a countryside that looked different from when he'd traveled it before. The Riverlands were healing, slowly, imperfectly, the way a wound heals when you keep picking at the scab, but healing nonetheless. Robb Stark's survival had changed the war's geometry. The Northern Army held the neck. The Freys were bottled up at the Twins, disgraced by their attempted betrayal. Word had spread, as it always did in Westeros, carried by ravens and rumors and small folk who had nothing left but their gossip, that Walder Frey had violated guest right. The bread and salt he'd offered meant nothing. The lords of the Riverlands, already exhausted by war, turned their backs on the Twins with the cold finality of a continent that took hospitality laws seriously, even when it took nothing else seriously. Wade passed through villages where people were rebuilding, thatching roofs, planting winter crops, burying the dead from the mountains' raids with wooden markers that wouldn't last a season but mattered to the people who placed them. The small folk of the Riverlands didn't know that a man from another dimension had prevented the Red Wedding. They didn't know that their survival was a ripple effect of a scarred man in red leather talking a young king out of walking into a trap. They just knew the war had paused, and in the pause, they planted. This is the part of the story the show never had time for, Wade said as he rode past a woman teaching her son to fish in a stream that had run red with blood 6 months earlier. The in-between, the people who aren't characters, the ones who just want to grow food and not get murdered and maybe, if the gods are feeling generous, die of old age instead of dragonfire or frostbite or a Lannister soldier's boredom. Winterfell rose from the northern landscape like a promise kept in stone. Wade had never seen it in person. In part 1, he'd gone south, not north, and the reality of it hit differently than the screen version. The walls were thick, ancient, built by Bran the Builder 8,000 years ago with the help of giants, if the legends were true. Steam rose from the hot springs that heated the castle through underground channels, now giving Winterfell a perpetual warmth that defied the northern cold. Dire wolf banners, the grey wolf on white, flew from every tower. Robb Stark's kingdom. Wade was admitted through the gates after a lengthy interrogation by northern guards who were, he noted, significantly more competent than their southern counterparts. The North had been at war. The North had nearly been betrayed. The North was not in the business of letting armed strangers walk into its ancestral seat without questions. He gave his name. He gave his reason. I have information for the king in the North regarding his family. He submitted to being disarmed, which meant handing over his katanas, 12 knives, and a dragonglass dagger he'd taken from Dragonstone's caves. The guards looked at the weaponry, then looked at him, and then looked at each other with the expression of men who were paid insufficient wages for this level of strangeness. They brought him to the Great Hall. Robb Stark sat at the head table with his mother, Catelyn Stark, at his right hand. Talisa, alive, visibly pregnant, the woman who should have died at the red wedding with a knife in her belly, sat at his left. Grey Wind lay at Robb's feet, enormous and calm, watching Wade with yellow eyes that tracked every movement. "The man in red," Robb said. "I wondered if I'd see you again." "Your Grace?" Wade bowed. Not sarcastically for once. "You look good. Alive. Healthy. Significantly less full of crossbow bolts than the original timeline intended. You speak in riddles, as before." "I do. It's a character trait. But today I'm here with something straightforward." He looked at Catelyn. "Lady Stark, I need to speak with you. Privately." Catelyn Stark studied him with the sharp, guarded eyes of a woman who had survived a war, a near massacre, and the politics of a kingdom that wanted her son dead. She was Tully steel wrapped in Stark fur. Riverland's pragmatism married to northern endurance. She had distrusted every stranger who'd entered Winterfell since Ned left for King's Landing, and she had been right to, because the last stranger who'd earned her trust had been Littlefinger, and Littlefinger had betrayed her husband to his death. "Anything you say to me, you can say before my son," Catelyn said. Wade hesitated. He looked at the audience. A quick glance upward, barely perceptible, the kind of fourth wall break that Westerosi characters interpreted as prayer or madness. "Okay," he said. "Okay. I'm going to tell you something, and it's going to hurt, and I'm sorry it's going to hurt, but you deserve to know it, and the person who should have told you is dead, and the person who should have told you before that kept it secret for 20 years because he loved his sister more than he feared his wife's anger." The hall went still. Robb's hand moved to his sword. Instinct, not intention. Grey Wind raised his head. "Jon Snow," Wade said, "is not Ned Stark's son." The silence that followed was the kind that Winterfell's walls had absorbed for thousands of years. The silence of truths that changed everything. "Jon Snow is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, Ned's sister, Robb's aunt. They were married in secret before Robert's rebellion. Lyanna died in childbirth in a place called the Tower of Joy and Dawn. And with her dying breath, she begged Ned to protect the baby, to hide him. Because Robert Baratheon would have murdered a Targaryen infant the same way Tywin's men murdered Rhaegar's other children. Smashed against a wall, wrapped in a Lannister cloak, and presented as a gift." Wade's voice was steady. No jokes. No fourth wall commentary. Just the truth, delivered in a stone hall to a woman who needed to hear it. Ned lied. To Robert. To his bannermen. To you. He claimed Jon as his bastard because the alternative was watching his sister's son be butchered by a king who would have seen a Targaryen baby as a threat to his stolen throne. He let the realm believe he'd dishonored his marriage vows. Catelyn Stark didn't speak for 2 days. She retreated to the Godswood, Winterfell's ancient grove of weirwood trees, where the heart tree's carved face wept red sap like tears of blood, and the old gods listened in silence to the prayers of those who still believed in them. Catelyn was not a follower of the old gods. She kept the faith of the Seven, the southern religion of her Tully upbringing, with its sept and its candles and its neatly categorized deities. Father, mother, warrior, maiden, smith, crone, stranger. But the Godswood was where Ned had prayed. It was where Ned had kept his secrets, and it was, she realized with the particular cruelty of hindsight, where he had probably sat with Jon Snow and wondered how long the lie could last. Wade left her alone. Some things couldn't be healed by a healing factor. Like some wounds needed air and time in the slow, agonizing process of rebuilding a narrative you'd lived inside for 2 decades. He used the time to plan. The forges of Winterfell were good. Castle-forged steel, competent smiths, the infrastructure of a great house that had maintained weapons and armor for generations. But they weren't what he needed. Valyrian steel couldn't be made in a standard forge. The secret of its creation had died with the Valyrian freehold 400 years ago, consumed by the doom that turned an empires of dragon lords into a smoking ruin in the Jade Sea. What remained were the existing Valyrian steel weapons, fewer than 200 in all of Westeros, and the knowledge that a handful of smiths still possessed how to rework existing Valyrian steel, melt it down, reshape it, reforge what already existed into new forms. Tobo Mott in King's Landing had that knowledge. He'd reforged Ice, the Stark ancestral greatsword, into 2 smaller blades on Tywin Lannister's orders, Widow's Wail for Joffrey, Oathkeeper for Jaime. But Wade wasn't going to King's Landing, not yet. He had a different smith in mind. He found Gendry 3 weeks later in a village called Salt Pans, on the coast of the Bay of Crabs. The young blacksmith, Robert Baratheon's unacknowledged bastard, blood of the Stag King, a boy who didn't know his father had sat the Iron Throne, was hammering horseshoes in a forge that was too small for his talent and too far from the story's main stage for the narrative to have noticed him yet. Gendry. The young man looked up. Broad-shouldered, dark-haired, with the Baratheon jaw, and the Baratheon stubbornness that ran through the bloodline like iron through ore. He held his hammer the way warriors held swords, naturally, instinctively, as if it were less a tool than an extension of himself. Do I know you? No, but I know you. You're Robert Baratheon's son. Don't panic. I'm not here to kill you, sell you, or drain your blood for a fire ritual. I'm here because you're the best young smith in Westeros, and I need weapons made that nobody else can make. Gendry's grip tightened on the hammer. He'd been hunted for his blood before. Gold cloaks in King's Landing, Melisandre on Dragonstone. He'd learned that being Robert's bastard was less a heritage than a target painted on his back in royal crimson. I'm nobody's smith, Gendry said. I work for myself now. I respect that. I also respect that you learned metalwork from Tobo Mott, who is one of maybe 3 smiths alive who knows how to rework Valyrian steel. You have the knowledge. I have the materials. Wade reached into his pack and pulled out something wrapped in oilcloth. He unrolled it on the forge table. Dragonglass. 3 large shards from Dragonstone's caves, black as midnight, sharp enough to cut through leather without pressure, and beside them, 2 fragments of Valyrian steel, small, dark, rippled with the distinctive patterns of spell-forged metal that had been cooled in dragonfire and blood 4 centuries ago. Where did you get Valyrian steel? Gendry breathed. The black market in King's Landing is remarkably accommodating if you know which alley to walk down and which merchant to threaten gently. These are fragments. Broken pieces from a damaged blade that a flea-bottom dealer was selling to the highest bidder. Not enough to make a long sword, but enough to make 2 short blades. Short blades. Katanas. Wade drew the shape in the air. Single-edged, curved, about this long, 2 of them, mirror images, and I want the dragonglass worked into the steel, folded in, alloyed, whatever the Valyrian equivalent is. I want blades that kill everything in this world. White walkers, whites, men, whatever else comes at me. I want the Valyrian steel to carry the dragonglass like a vein carries blood. Gendry looked at the materials. His smith's mind was already working. Wade could see it in his eyes, the calculations of heat and metal and technique that separated a good blacksmith from a great one. Nintobo Mott had taught him the theory of Valyrian reworking. He'd never practiced it. But Baratheon blood ran hot, and Baratheons had always been drawn to the forge. Robert's war hammer, the crowned stag, the iron will that had swung a kingdom away from dragons. It might not work, Gendry said. Valyrian steel and dragonglass. Nobody's ever combined them. The magic could conflict. The blades could shatter. Or they could be something new. Something this world has never seen. Wade leaned on the forge table. I'm not going to pretend I understand the metallurgy. Where I come from, weapons are made in factories by machines, and the most exotic material is carbon fiber. But I know this. The long night is coming. The dead are marching, and the living need every advantage they can forge, literally, before winter reaches the wall. Gendry studied him. You're the one they talk about. The man who can't die. That's me. Healing factor. It's a whole thing. The point is, I'll survive whether you make these blades or not. But a lot of other people won't survive unless the living have weapons that matter against what's coming. You can make horseshoes in salt pans until the snow buries this village, or you can forge something that legends are made of. The fire in the forge crackled. Gendry looked at the dragonglass, looked at the Valyrian steel, looked at the forge that was too small for him and always had been. I'll need a bigger fire, he said. Dragonstone's got volcanic vents that'll melt anything you put near them. Then we go to Dragonstone? Wade grinned. Road trip? They sailed for Dragonstone the next. Wade returned to King's Landing because he had unfinished business with a queen, a prophecy, and a woman who had pushed a girl into a well when she was 10 years old. The capital hadn't changed. It had merely intensified. The stink richer, the politics sharper, the paranoia thicker in the air than the smoke from Flea Bottom's cooking fires. Cersei Lannister sat the Iron Throne as regent for Tommen now. Joffrey was dead, poisoned at his own wedding by Olenna Tyrell in an act of elegant murder that the Queen of Thorns had executed with the calm precision of a woman who'd been outsmarting men since before most of them were born. The purple wedding had happened on schedule. Some events, Wade reflected, were apparently fixed points that even a broken timeline couldn't shift. Joffrey had choked on his own cruelty, as in Westeros was marginally better for it. Tyrion was gone, fled after killing Tywin on the Privy with a crossbow, exactly as the original timeline dictated. Another fixed point. Some deaths, it seemed, were load-bearing walls in the narrative's architecture. Remove them, and the whole structure collapsed. Wade mourned Tyrion's departure from King's Landing the way you mourn a friend moving to another city. Not with grief, but with the dull recognition that your favorite drinking companion was now on another continent, and the bars would be lonelier for it. He entered the city through the sewers because the gates were watched, and Cersei had, predictably, issued a standing order for his capture. The reward was generous. 500 gold dragons, dead or alive, and with a note specifying that dead was preferred, but alive for questioning was acceptable. Wade appreciated the pragmatism. He'd have offered the same, minus the questioning. He surfaced in the Red Keep's lower tunnels, Varys's old network, abandoned since the Spider had fled with Tyrion. The secret passages were unchanged. The Red Keep's architects had built paranoia into the walls, and paranoia aged well. He found Cersei in her chambers at midnight, not through invitation, not through stealth, through the simple method of walking past 4 Kingsguard, being stabbed twice, healing in front of them, and continuing to walk while they stared in the particular horror of men confronting something their training hadn't covered. Cersei was drinking. She was always drinking now. Arbor Gold, sweet and acidic, and the wine she used to fill the spaces between her fears. Tommen was king. Margaery Tyrell was queen. The High Sparrow was gathering power in the Sept, and her father, the immovable object around which all Lannister strategy orbited, was dead on a privy with his own son's crossbow bolt in his chest. She looked up when Wade entered. The fear flickered and was buried. Cersei Lannister did not show fear. She converted it to rage and stored it in the same place she stored everything else, behind the green eyes, beside the wildfire. "You," she said. "Me." Wade sat down across from her. The new katanas were on his back. Valyrian steel and dragonglass, dark and humming. He didn't draw them. This wasn't a sword conversation. This was something sharper. "I had you banned from the city. You had me sentenced to death. Subtle difference. Then banning implies I'd respect the boundary. Death implies your soldiers can enforce it. Neither is accurate. What do you want?" Wade leaned back, looked at the ceiling, then at the audience. "This is the scene," he said quietly. "The one the comments asked for. Maggy the Frog, the prophecy that's been eating Cersei alive since she was a child. The show mentioned it in a flashback. The books go deeper, and right now, I'm going to go the deepest, because this woman has been running from a fortune teller's words for 30 years, and I'm about to make her stand still and listen." He looked at Cersei. "When you were 10 years old, you visited a witch in the woods near Casterly Rock, a fortune teller called Maggy the Frog. You went with your friend Melara Heatherspoon. You were young and arrogant, and you demanded that Maggy tell your future. She did." Cersei's hand stopped halfway to her wine glass. "She told you that you'd be queen, not the queen you wanted. Not married to the prince, Rhaegar, but queen nonetheless. Married to a king. Robert Baratheon, as it turned out. A drunk who loved a dead woman more than he'd ever loved you." Wade's voice was measured, clinical, the comedy stripped away like bandages off a wound. "She told you that the king would have 20 children and you would have 3. Robert's bastards? 20, scattered across the realm, most of them dead now because you had them hunted. Your 3, Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen. Gold their crowns and gold their shrouds." The color drained from Cersei's face. Not slowly, all at once, like a tide pulling out. "Joffrey is dead," Wade said. "Gold his crown, gold his shroud. Myrcella is in Dorne. Nice, and if the timeline holds, and some things do hold, Cersei, I've learned that, she won't come back alive. Gold her crown, gold her shroud, and Tommen..." "Stop. Tommen is gentle and good and completely unequipped for the world you've built around him. And when you burn the Sept of Baelor with wildfire, when you kill Margaery and the High Sparrow and everyone inside because you'd rather incinerate your enemies than face trial, Tommen will walk to his window and step out. Gold his crown, gold his shroud." Cersei stood. The wine glass shattered on the floor. Not thrown, simply released, her fingers opening as if the muscles that controlled them had disconnected from the mechanisms of intent. "But that's not all Maggy told you, is it?" Wade continued. He didn't stand, didn't move, just sat in the chair like a man reading from a book that only he could see. "She told you about the Valonqar, the little brother, younger sibling in Valyrian, the one who would wrap their hands around your pale white throat and choke the life from you. And you've spent your entire adult life believing that meant Tyrion, your little brother, the dwarf you've hated since birth because your mother died bringing him into the world." He paused. "But Jaime is also your younger brother. By minutes, twins. You came first. He came second. Cersei, the prophecy was never about Tyrion." The sound Cersei made was not a scream. It was something lower, something older, like something that came from the place beneath the queen and the mother and the lover and the schemer. From the 10-year-old girl in the woods who had asked a witch to tell her future and had spent every day since trying to outrun the answer. "And Melara," Wade said. almost gently now. Your friend, Malara Heatherspoon. She heard a prophecy too that night. She heard that she would die young, and on the walk home from Maggy's tent, she fell into a well. He looked at Cersei. Didn't she? It wasn't a question. The silence. He found Randall Tarly on the Rose Road, 3 days south of Horn Hill, marching at the head of a column of Reach soldiers with the rigid posture of a man who believed military discipline was a substitute for human decency. Lord Randall Tarly, head of House Tarly, wielder of Heartsbane, one of the few Valyrian steel swords in Westeros, a blade he considered his birthright and his legacy. A weapon he would sooner see destroyed than passed to his eldest son. Because his eldest son was Samwell. Fat, bookish, gentle Samwell, who feared blood and loved stories and had been sent to the Night's Watch under threat of murder by his own father, because Randall Tarly would rather have no heir than an heir who didn't meet his standard of manhood. Wade stepped into the road. The column stopped. Horses stamped. As the soldiers reached for weapons with the trained wariness of men who'd been at war long enough to see threats in everything. Randall Tarly rode forward on a destrier that cost more than most small folk earned in a lifetime, and looked down at Wade with the expression of a man examining something on his boot. Clear the road. Lord Tarly. Quick question. Does the name Samwell Tarly mean anything to you, or did you forget him the moment you shipped him off to freeze at the wall? The temperature of the conversation dropped 20 degrees, not because of anything the Night King was doing. Randall's jaw tightened. The Tarly discipline, the famous iron control that made him arguably the finest battlefield commander in the Reach, locked every muscle in his face into an expression of cold fury that would have intimidated anyone who could die. Who are you? Nobody important. But your son is. Your son, the one you threatened to kill if he didn't renounce his inheritance, the one you called weak and soft and worthless, the one you sent to the wall because you were ashamed. That son is going to be the reason House Tarly survives. My son, Randall said, investing the word with a contempt that could have stripped paint, is a craven who weeps at the sight of blood. Your son killed a White Walker. The silence that followed was different from the Cersei silence. That had been the silence of a woman watching her inner architecture collapse. This was the silence of a man hearing something so far outside his worldview that his mind physically refused to process it. Your son, Wade continued, went beyond the wall on arranging with the Night's Watch. Now he encountered a White Walker, a creature of ice and death, 8 feet tall, with a sword that shatters steel. And Samwell Tarly killed it with a dragonglass dagger. He's the first man in thousands of years to kill a White Walker. The brothers of the Night's Watch call him Sam the Slayer. He's studying at the Citadel right now, learning the secrets that might save the entire realm from the Long Night. And he did all of that, all of it, after you told him he was nothing. Randall's horse shifted. The Lord steadied it with a hand that didn't tremble, because Randall Tarly's hands never trembled, not in battle and not in conversation, and certainly not when confronted by a scarred stranger making claims about the son he'd discarded. You speak nonsense, I speak the future. And then here's the part of the future that concerns you specifically. Wade stepped closer. The soldiers behind Randall tensed. Wade's katanas were on his back. Dark Valyrian steel, rippled, the dragonglass threading through the metal like black veins. He didn't reach for them. Daenerys Targaryen is coming. She has 3 dragons. She's going to land on Westeros with the largest invasion force since Aegon the Conqueror, and she's going to demand that every lord in the 7 kingdoms bend the knee. You, because you are constitutionally incapable of bending anything, including your own stubbornness, are going to refuse. He paused for effect. He was Deadpool. Effect was non-negotiable. And she's going to burn you alive. Dragonfire, Drogon, the big one, you and your younger son Dickon. Yes, that's his actual name, and no. And I will not make the joke because even I have limits and this scene is too important. Standing in a field, refusing to kneel, and Daenerys choosing fire and blood because that's what Targaryens choose when they're not given what they want. Randall stared at him. You threaten me with fairy tales. Dragons are extinct. They were extinct. Now there are 3. And the woman who hatched them walked into a funeral pyre and came out unburned with 3 baby dragons on her shoulders. She spent the last several years conquering Essos, freeing slaves, and burning everyone who tells her no. She is coming here, Lord Tarly, and when she arrives, you will have a choice. Kneel or burn. A Tarly does not kneel to foreign invaders. A Tarly should consider kneeling to keep his house alive. Because if you burn, and you will, son, I've seen it, Samwell inherits Horn Hill. Sam, the son you threw away. He'll come home with a wildling woman named Gilly and her son, and they will be the future of House Tarly. The fat boy who reads books will carry your name forward. The warrior who refused to kneel will be Ash. Wade looked at him. The comedy was gone. The fourth wall was present but muted. A glance toward the audience, an acknowledgement that this was the scene the comments had requested, delivered not as a punchline, but as a confrontation between a father's cruelty and the future it couldn't prevent. We're halfway through this story, and it's only getting more intense. If you're enjoying it, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, which character would you drop into Westeros? The realm is always hungry for new players. I'm not telling you this to mock you, Wade said. I'm telling you because your son deserved a father who saw him clearly. Sam is brave. Not your kind of brave. Not the killing kind. The other kind. The kind that goes to the worst place in the world, faces the thing that terrifies him most, and does it anyway because someone has to. He's at the Citadel proving that the long night is real while you're marching soldiers around the Reach pretending the biggest threat to Westeros is a political disagreement over who sits on a chair made of swords. Randall's expression hadn't changed. The iron discipline held. But something behind his eyes, deep buried in the place where fathers keep the feelings they refuse to examine, shifted. You know nothing of my son, Randall said. But the certainty in his voice had cracked. Hairline. Invisible to his soldiers. Visible to Wade, because Wade Wilson had spent a lifetime reading the distance between what people said and what they felt. His entire fourth wall existence was built on the gap between performance and truth. I know he's better than you think, Wade said, and I know that if you die on a Targaryen battlefield, the last thing you'll think about is whether he was right and you were wrong. Save yourself the deathbed regret, Lord Tarly. Go home. When the dragons come, kneel, live. And maybe, when winter reaches the Reach and the dead start marching through lands that have never seen snow, you'll be glad your son learned how to kill the things that snow brings with it. He stepped off the road. The column waited. Randall Tarly looked at the scarred man in red leather with the impossible blades and the impossible knowledge and the impossible certainty. Then he spurred his horse and rode on. He's not going to listen, Wade told the audience. They never listen, but I said it. I looked a man in the eye and told him his son was worth something. And in this story, in this broken, burned, frozen, bleeding story, that counts for more than you think. She arrived on a Tuesday. Wade knew it was a Tuesday because he'd maintained his day tracking system from part 1. Fish markets, executions, wine deliveries, and because Daenerys Targaryen landing on Dragonstone with 3 dragons, 8,000 unsullied, 100,000 Dothraki screamers, and a dwarf who drank and knew things was the kind of event that branded itself into your memory alongside the day of the week, the weather, and what you'd been eating when the sky caught fire. He watched from the cliffs above the beach, the same beach where he'd washed ashore twice now, once from Melisandre's portal, once from his stolen rowboat, the same volcanic sand, the same dragonglass glittering in the surf. But the beach looked different with 3 dragons circling overhead, with their wingspans blocking the sun in rotating intervals like the world's most terrifying ceiling fans. Drogon was enormous. The show hadn't conveyed scale properly. Couldn't, really, because screens had edges and Drogon didn't. He was black and red and the size of a building, and when he roared, the sound wasn't just heard, but felt, a vibration that traveled through stone and bone and the primal mammalian hindbrain that remembered when things with wings and fire were the dominant predators and everything else was food. Rhaegal and Viserion flanked him, green and gold, smaller but still large enough to burn a castle to slag. 3 dragons. The first seen in Westeros in over a century. That nuclear weapons with heartbeats and loyalty to a silver-haired woman who had walked through fire and come out the other side believing she was destined to rule the world. There she is, Wade said quietly. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen. First of her name. Queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar and the First Men. Protector of the 7 Kingdoms. Mother of Dragons. Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea. Breaker of chains. The unburnt. He paused. Also, in the original timeline, the woman who burns King's Landing to the ground and murders 500,000 civilians because the show decided that 8 episodes was enough time to turn a liberator into a war criminal. He sat on the cliff's edge and let his legs dangle over the drop. That's what I'm here to fix. That's the big one, not the Red Wedding. That was part 1. This is the endgame. And Daenerys Targaryen's descent into madness was the most controversial storytelling decision in television history. And not because the idea was bad. The idea was there in the source material. The seeds were planted. The Targaryen coin flip, the fire and blood, the increasingly ruthless decisions masked as liberation. The problem wasn't that Daenerys went mad. The problem was that the show didn't earn it. They rushed it. They crammed a slow-burn psychological deterioration into 2 episodes and expected the audience to buy it. He looked at the dragons. So I'm not going to prevent her from facing darkness. That's not how Game of Thrones works. Nobody escapes their nature. But I'm going to make sure she has the support, the time, and the honest counsel that the original timeline denied her. I'm going to give her the chance to choose. Not a rushed choice between sanity and madness in a single episode. A real choice, earned over time, with real people telling her real truths instead of enabling her worst instincts. He stood up. Starting now. Getting an audience with Daenerys Targaryen was simultaneously easier and harder than getting an audience with Cersei. Easier because Daenerys styled herself as a queen of the people, accessible, approachable, the breaker of chains who freed slaves and invited the common folk to petition her. Harder because Daenerys was also a conqueror, surrounded by the most loyal and lethal personal guard in the known world, and her definition of accessible didn't extend to unannounced scarred men with impossible weapons who appeared on her ancestral island without explanation. Grey Worm stopped him at the gate of the castle. The unsullied commander stood like a wall, made of discipline and absolute devotion, his spear leveled, his expression carrying the particular blankness of a man who had been trained since childhood to feel nothing and had only recently begun to rediscover emotions through Missandei's love and Daenerys' cause. "I seek the Queen," Wade said. "The Queen does not receive uninvited guests. Tell her that the man who cannot die is here, and he knows about the bells." Grey Worm's expression didn't change, but he sent a runner, and 20 minutes later, Wade Wilson was escorted into the map room of Dragonstone. The great chamber with the painted table, Aegon's strategic masterpiece, a carved wooden map of Westeros where every mountain and river and castle was rendered in relief, and the entire continent looked like what it was, a game board. Daenerys sat at the head of the table. Tyrion stood at her right, and Wade's heart did something complicated when he saw the dwarf, because Tyrion Lannister was his friend, or as close to a friend as Wade made in worlds that weren't his own, and here he was, Hand of the Queen, serving a woman whose future Wade had come to rewrite. Tyrion, Wade said. Wade. Tyrion's eyes were wary but warm. You look terrible. I always look terrible. It's brand consistency. He turned to Daenerys. Your Grace. Daenerys studied him. She had the Targaryen look. Silver gold hair, violet eyes, cheekbones that could cut glass, and a jaw that suggested the glass would be lucky. But underneath the beauty was steel, forged in fire, literally, tempered by exile and betrayal and the slow accumulation of power that came from hatching dragons and conquering cities and refusing to accept a world that told her she was nothing. You're the one Tyrion told me about, she said. The man from another world. That's me. He says you know the future. I know a future, the original one, the one I've been breaking since I got here. He sat down without being invited, which caused Grey Worm's hand to tighten on his spear and Missandei's eyes to narrow and Tyrion to wince with the practiced discomfort of a man who'd been managing diplomatic incidents his entire career. The future I know goes like this, Wade said. You land on Dragonstone, you gather allies, you lose allies, the Tyrells, the Martells, the Greyjoys who followed Yara. And Cersei outmaneuvers you because you listen to advisors who tell you to be patient when patience costs you everything. You go north to fight the dead and you lose a dragon, Viserion, the gold one. The Night King kills him and raises him as an ice dragon and uses him to bring down the wall. You fight the long night at Winterfell and win, barely, but the cost is devastating. And then, he stopped, and then you fly south, to King's Landing, to the throne you've wanted your entire life, and the city surrenders. The bells ring, the war is over. You've won. His voice dropped, and you burn it anyway. The room was silent. Daenerys' expression hadn't changed, but something behind her eyes, deep in the Targaryen place where fire lived alongside madness, alongside greatness, flickered. You destroy King's Landing, Wade said. 500,000 people, Melisandre, found him that night. Wade was on Dragonstone's ramparts, staring at the mainland across the Blackwater and processing the fact that Daenerys hadn't had him executed, which he attributed partly to Tyrion's advocacy and partly to the dragons being well fed that day. She dismissed him without response, not with anger, not with acceptance, but with the controlled silence of a woman who needed time to sit with something that threatened to reshape her understanding of herself. That was progress. In the original timeline, nobody had told Daenerys the truth about what she was capable of becoming. Jorah worshipped her. Missandei loved her. Tyrion believed in her. Grey Worm obeyed her. None of them had the cruelty or the courage to say, the thing you fear about your family's blood is real, and it lives in you, and that if you don't build defenses against it, it will consume you. They'd enabled her with devotion, and devotion without honesty was just a prettier form of abandonment. The Lord of Light brought you here for a purpose. Melisandre's voice came from the shadows behind him. She'd aged since their first encounter on this island. Or rather, she looked the same, which meant the magic was holding, which meant the ruby at her throat was still burning its ancient fuel to maintain the illusion of youth over the centuries-old woman beneath. Melisandre? Red woman. You look... He paused. Actually, I know what's under the glamour, so I'm going to choose my words carefully and say you look exactly as magical as advertised. You mock, as always, but the flames have shown me your face. My actual face or the mask? Because if the flames showed my actual face, I apologize on behalf of my face. It's not its fault. There was a military torture program and a lot of involuntary mutation, and the flames showed you standing at the convergence. Her voice carried the weight of prophecy. Not performed, not theatrical, but the genuine heavy certainty of a woman who had looked into fire for centuries and seen things that defied her ability to disbelieve. Ice and fire, death and life. The prince that was promised and the darkness that must be defeated. You stand where those forces meet. Wade turned to face her. The humor faded, because this was the scene. The prince that was promised. The prophecy that the show had fumbled worse than Daenerys' madness arc. The ancient promise that someone would rise to defeat the Long Night and save the living. And the show had resolved it with Arya jumping out of nowhere with a dagger and the Night King shattering like a glass Christmas ornament. "Let's talk about that," Wade said. "The prince that was promised. Azor Ahai, the hero who will draw a burning sword from fire and drive back the darkness. You've been searching for this person your entire life. You thought it was Stannis. You burned his daughter alive for that belief. You were wrong." Melisandre flinched, barely perceptible. But the memory of Shireen, the girl screaming in the flames, the sacrifice that brought nothing, the faith that consumed an innocent child, lived somewhere behind the ruby and the magic and the centuries of conviction. "Then you thought it was Jon Snow," Wade continued. "You brought him back from the dead, which, credit where it's due, was a genuine miracle. And Jon Snow died, and you resurrected him, and that is objectively the most impressive thing anyone has done on this show outside of hatching dragons. But Jon isn't Azor Ahai either, not the way the prophecy means it. Who then?" Wade sat on the rampart's edge. Below, the sea churned against Dragonstone's volcanic shores. The sound was ancient, older than prophecy, older than dragons, the sound of water against stone repeating forever. "Here's the thing about prophecy and Game of Thrones," he said, "and I'm going to break the fourth wall harder than usual here because this is important, and I want the audience to hear it." He looked up. "Prophecy in this story is a trap. It's designed to mislead. Cersei spent her life trying to avoid Maggy the Frog's words and fulfilled them through avoidance. Stannis burned his daughter for a prophecy that was never about him. Rhaegar Targaryen believed his children were the princes that were promised and abandoned his wife for Lyanna Stark to fulfill it, which started Robert's rebellion, which killed him, which destroyed the Targaryen dynasty, which created every problem this show has ever depicted." He paused. "Prophecy in Game of Thrones doesn't tell you who the hero is. It tells you who believes hard enough to destroy themselves trying to become one." Melisandre was quiet. The ruby pulsed at her throat. The sea crashed below. "So who is the prince that was promised?" Wade said. "Everyone and no one. It's not one person with a burning sword. It's the decision. The collective, desperate, last-stand decision of every living being in Westeros to fight the dead together. Jon Snow leads the armies. Daenerys brings the dragons. Arya strikes the killing blow. Bran provides the knowledge. Tyrion builds the strategy. Jorah dies protecting his queen. Theon dies protecting Bran. Every person who stands at Winterfell and says, 'Not today,' to the god of death. They're all the prince that was promised. The prophecy isn't about a hero, it's about a choice." He looked at Melisandre. "And your job, your actual, honest to whatever god you serve job, is not to find a champion and burn people for them. It's to light the fire that guides the living through the darkness. Literally. At Winterfell, in the long night, you light the Dothraki swords. You light the trench. You give the living fire when they need it most. And then you die. You walk out into the snow and the magic leaves you and you're just an old woman who finally did what she was supposed to do." The Red Woman stared at him. The centuries' deep conviction in her eyes wavered. Not broken, but restructured, like a building being renovated from the inside while the exterior held. "How do you know these things?" she whispered. "Because I watched the story, and the story got the details right even when it got the pacing wrong. The long night happens. The dead come. The living fight. But in the version I saw, it was one episode. One night. Over in an hour, and the biggest existential threat in 8,000 years was reduced to a speed bump on the way to the real finale, which was a political argument over who sits in the big chair." He stood. "That's what I'm fixing. The long night deserves more than one battle. The dead deserve to be the threat they were built to be. So when the living deserve to earn their survival through sacrifice and strategy and the kind of desperate courage that makes legends real. Melisandre looked at the fire burning in the brazier on the rampart. The flames danced. She read them. She always read them, searching for confirmation or denial or the familiar comfort of divine instruction. "I see fire," she said. "I see ice. I see a wall falling and a dragon screaming and a darkness that stretches across the north like a blanket over a child's face. That's the long night. I see you, standing in the middle of it, with blades that burn black." Wade touched the hilts of his katanas, Valyrian steel and dragonglass. Blades that burned black in the forge when Gendry quenched them, and blades that no prophecy had ever predicted because they shouldn't exist. An alloy of two magical materials from a world that kept its magic systems separate, forged by a Baratheon bastard for a man from another universe. "The prince that was promised wields a burning sword," Melisandre said. "Lightbringer. I'm not the Prince Red. I'm not even from this story. I'm the guy who watched the story and decided the ending needed work." He grinned under the mask. "But I'll carry the weird swords into the scary dark if that's what it takes." The wall came down on a morning so cold that the air itself seemed to crystallize, each breath turning to ice before it left the lungs. Wade was at Winterfell when the ravens arrived. Black wings carrying white scrolls, carrying the worst news in 8,000 years. The Night King had breached the wall, not at Castle Black, where the Night's Watch had concentrated its meager remaining forces, but at Eastwatch by the sea, where the wall met the ocean and the ice was thinnest and the defenses were weakest. In the original timeline, the Night King had brought the wall down with Viserion, the undead dragon's blue flame melting 8,000 years of ice and magic in minutes. In this timeline, Viserion was still alive, still golden, still circling Dragonstone with his brothers. The Night King found another way, and he came with the cold itself. The army of the dead, 100,000 wights, giants among them, spiders the size of horses, pressed against the wall at Eastwatch with the weight of an ocean. And the wall, ancient and magical and supposedly impervious, cracked, not all at once, not dramatically. Slowly, like a dam that had held for millennia, finally meeting a force it couldn't contain. The ice groaned, the magic woven into its foundation by the children of the forest, and Bran the Builder strained against the Night King's will. Because the Night King was himself a creation of the children, made from their magic, and the wall's wards recognized his power as something that had once been authorized and couldn't quite refuse. The breach was 50 feet wide. Enough. The dead poured through like water through a crack in a levee, and an Eastwatch fell in hours, and the Night's Watch brothers stationed there joined the army that killed them without the dignity of a funeral or the mercy of a final prayer. Wade stood in Winterfell's courtyard and watched the raven scroll tremble in Jon Snow's hand. Jon Snow, the man who was not Ned Stark's bastard, the man who was Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name, heir to the Iron Throne, knower of nothing. He'd been told the truth by now. Robb had told him, after Catelyn had confirmed it through weeks of anguished reflection and a conversation with Howland Reed, that Wade had facilitated through a series of very persistent ravens. Jon had received the news with the quiet, stunned grace of a man whose entire identity had been rebuilt from the foundation up, and he was still processing it. Would be processing it for years, improbably. But the dead didn't care about identity crises. "The wall has fallen," Jon said. The words landed in the courtyard like stones. Around him, the assembled forces of the living, Northern Lords, Stark bannermen, wildlings who'd crossed south with Jon after Hardhome, the vanguard of Daenerys' army that had sailed north from Dragonstone, absorbed the news with the particular silence of people who had been told the apocalypse was coming and had believed it intellectually but not emotionally until this exact moment. Daenerys was there. She'd come north with her dragons and her armies because Wade had spent 3 weeks making the case. Not alone, but with Tyrion's rhetoric and Jon's earnest northern conviction and the weight of every piece of evidence that the dead were real and marching. She'd come not because she believed Wade's story about her future madness. That conversation remained unresolved, a wound she'd sealed but not healed, but because she recognized that the long night was real and that a queen who let her kingdom fall to the dead would have nothing left to rule. "Then we fight," Daenerys said. "We fight," Jon agreed. Wade looked at the audience. This is it, the long night, the big one, the battle that the original show compressed into a single episode so dark that half the audience literally couldn't see what was happening. 80 minutes of combat and then Arya with a dagger, and the existential threat of the entire series was over before the final credits. He drew his katanas. The Valyrian steel dragonglass alloy caught the winter light and split it into dark prisms. Not this time. This time, the long night is a war. Not a battle, a war. The first engagement came 3 days later, 40 miles north of Winterfell. A scouting force of 3,000 whites, the Night King's probe, testing defenses, measuring response time, assessing the living strength. Jon led the counterforce. Northern cavalry, wildling skirmishers, a company of unsullied who had never fought in snow and whose discipline was tested by cold that turned steel brittle and breath to ice. Wade fought in the vanguard because Wade always fought in the vanguard because dying was an inconvenience rather than a consequence, and he could absorb damage that would kill any other soldier and get back up while his healing factor rebuilt whatever the whites had torn apart. The katanas were extraordinary. Valyrian steel killed White Walkers on contact. Everyone knew that. But the dragonglass alloy did something more. When the blade struck whites, the obsidian threading through the metal flared with a cold black light, and the whites didn't just fall. They unraveled, the necromantic energy that animated them disrupted at a fundamental level. One cut, and the magic binding dead flesh to the Night King's will simply ceased, and the white collapsed into what it had always been. A corpse. "Oh, I like these," Wade said, cutting through a white that had been a wildling woman and was now a rotting puppet with blue eyes and no soul. "Gendry, if you can hear me, and you can't because you're at Dragonstone, but narratively I'm giving you credit. You're a genius." The first engagement was a victory. Costly, 200 living dead, which meant 200 new whites for the Night King's army. But a victory. The probe was repelled. The living learned what worked. Dragonglass arrows fired from distance, Valyrian steel for the White Walker commanders, fire for the massed whites, and the dragons for everything else. Drogon's fire carved swaths through the dead that turned night to day. Rhaegal with Jon Snow on his back. A Targaryen riding a dragon, the blood of old Valyria made manifest, burned the flanks. Viserion, riderless but following his brothers, torched the reserves. But the Night King adapted. He always adapted. After the first engagement, the white armies spread, no longer concentrated in a single force, but dispersed across the north in dozens of smaller groups, hitting villages, ambushing supply lines, raising fresh dead from every cemetery and battlefield and shallow grave in the northern countryside. And the living couldn't be everywhere. The dragons couldn't be everywhere. And every loss fed the enemy's ranks. The second engagement was worse. 50 miles west of Winterfell, a force of 10,000 whites hit the combined Stark-Lannister column, because Jaime Lannister had come north, alone, abandoning Cersei and her madness to fight for the living because whatever else the Kingslayer was, he was a man who kept the oaths that mattered when the world was ending. The battle lasted 8 hours. The dead came in waves. The living held, then bent, then nearly broke. The Battle of Winterfell lasted 3 days, Not one night, not 80 minutes of screen time so dark, the audience adjusted their television settings and still couldn't see what was happening. 3 days of continuous, rolling, desperate combat that ebbed and surged like a tide of death against the walls of the oldest castle in the north. The living had prepared. Jon Snow and Robb Stark, brothers, cousins, co-commanders, 2 young men carrying the weight of human survival on shoulders that hadn't stopped aching since the war began, had fortified Winterfell with every defensive measure available. Trenches filled with pitch, dragonglass-tipped stakes in concentric rings, archers on every wall with obsidian-tipped arrows, the unsullied and disciplined phalanx formations at the gates, northern infantry on the flanks, and Dothraki cavalry, their araks fitted with dragonglass edges at Wade's suggestion in reserve for countercharges. And above it all, 3 dragons. The first day was survivable. The White Army hit Winterfell's outer defenses like a wave hitting a seawall. Enormous, powerful, but broken by the structure. The trenches lit. The dragonglass stakes impaled thousands. The archers fired until their arms failed, and their replacements took the walls and fired more. Drogon and Rhaegal strafed the dead in passes that turned acres of whites into funeral pyres. The living held. The first night was horror. The Night King raised every corpse that fell during the day. Thousands of fresh whites, men and women who had been fighting for the living that morning and now fought against them with the same weapons they had carried in life. The psychological impact was devastating. Northern soldiers faced their brothers. Dothraki warriors fought their blood riders. The Unsullied, trained to suppress emotion, fought in mechanical silence while the corpses of their comrades attacked with familiar spear techniques. Wade fought without rest. He couldn't tire. His healing factor reset his muscles, purged lactic acid, rebuilt torn tissue faster than combat could damage it. He was a perpetual motion machine of violence in the service of survival, his black-veined katanas carving through whites with the efficiency of weapons that were never supposed to exist in a war that was never supposed to last this long. On the second day, the White Walker commanders came. They moved through the battle like winter given form, tall, gaunt, armored in ice that reflected no light. They're carrying blades that shattered castle-forged steel on contact. Each one commanded a section of the dead, and when they advanced, the whites around them fought with coordinated precision rather than mindless aggression. Kill a walker, and its whites collapsed. But reaching a walker meant cutting through thousands of dead to get there. Jon Snow took one in single combat outside the main gate. Longclaw, Valyrian steel, Mormont legacy, rang against the walker's ice blade in a fight that the bards would have written songs about if any bards survived to write them. Jon was outmatched in raw strength. The walker was ancient, inhuman, tireless. But Jon had something the walker didn't. He'd died once already and come back, and a man who'd been resurrected carried a particular ferocity that the merely living couldn't match. Longclaw found the walker's throat, and the creature shattered, and 1,000 whites dropped around them like puppets with cut strings. Robb took one with Grey Wind, the direwolf, enormous now, battle-scarred, the size of a small horse, hamstrung the walker, while Robb drove a dragonglass blade through its chest. The king in the north and his wolf, fighting together the way the old gods had intended when they sent the direwolves to the Stark children a lifetime ago. Jaime Lannister took one with his golden hand and Widow's Wail. The golden hand caught the walker's ice blade, metal screeching, frozen mist erupting from the contact. And Widow's Wail, reforged Stark steel carrying the ghost of ice, punched through ancient ice armor. The Kingslayer, the man who'd killed one king to save a city, was now killing a general of the dead to save a species. Redemption paid in frozen blood. Wade took 3. Because his healing factor meant he could absorb hits that would kill anyone else, he charged the walker positions directly. A one-man breach team, dying and regenerating, and dying again while his katanas found their targets. The dragonglass alloy flared black with each kill, and the whites around each fallen walker collapsed in waves that opened gaps in the dead's formation for the living to exploit. The second night, Daenerys burned the dead in a sweep that lasted 4 hours. Drogon's fire, not ordinary fire, but dragon fire, magical, consuming the flame that had forged the Iron Throne and destroyed Harrenhal, annihilated tens of thousands of whites in a single sustained pass along the eastern front. The heat was so intense that the snow melted for 100 yards on each side, and the frozen ground beneath turned to mud and steam. But the Night King was waiting. He came on the third day, personally, riding through the broken outer defenses on a dead horse that moved like smoke over ice, surrounded by his remaining walker generals, carrying the cold before him like a weapon. Where he walked, the temperature dropped below what living flesh could endure. Torches guttered, fires dimmed. The dragon's flames sputtered when they passed near him, their magical fire disrupted by his magical ice in the ancient opposition that had defined this world since its creation. He came for Bran. The three-eyed raven sat in the God's Wood beneath the Heart Tree, exactly as he had in the original timeline. And Bran Stark, or what remained of Bran Stark behind the omniscient, emotionally distant entity he'd become, served as bait. The Night King wanted him. Wanted the knowledge stored in the Weirwood network. Wanted to destroy the living's memory, to erase humanity's history, and plunge the world into an eternal winter where nothing was remembered and nothing mattered, and the dead ruled a silent, frozen earth. Wade met the Night King at the edge of the God's Wood. He didn't plan it. There was no dramatic positioning, no prophesied confrontation, no burning sword drawn from the flames of destiny. Wade was simply there, in the right place at the wrong time, as he always was, as his entire existence demanded. Standing between an ancient embodiment of death and a tree full of memory. The Night King looked at him. Wade had been looked at by a lot of powerful beings across multiple universes and film franchises. Thanos, Cable, that one really angry taxi driver in the first movie. But the Night King's gaze was different. It wasn't malice. It wasn't hatred. It was assessment. Cold, ancient, patient assessment from a being that had spent 8,000 years cataloging every threat to his dominion and dismissing them one by one. Wade felt his healing factor shudder. Not stop, never stop, but struggle for the first time since he'd arrived in this world. The Night King's presence pressed against his cellular regeneration like ice pressing against a window pane, testing the glass, looking for cracks. "Oh," Wade said. "Oh, that's new. You're actually affecting my healing factor. Nobody does that. So that's a copyright violation of my mutation." The Night King raised his hand. The gesture that raised the dead, the gesture that had turned Hardhome into a nightmare and turned Viserion into an ice dragon and turned every battlefield into a recruitment center for his army. Wade felt it. The pull, the cold reaching into his cells, looking for the death that lived alongside his regeneration. Because Wade Wilson was dying and healing simultaneously, always, forever, cancer and cure in an endless loop. And the Night King's power recognized the death in him and reached for it. "No," Wade said. His healing factor blazed, not metaphorically, literally. The katanas in his hands flared, the dragonglass veins pulsing with black fire, and his cells accelerated their regeneration to a rate that burned from the inside. Fighting the Night King's cold with the sheer biological stubbornness of a man whose body refused to stop living even when the universe's most powerful embodiment of death demanded it. The Night King tilted his head. Curious. For the first time in 8,000 years, something wasn't dying when he told it to. "I can't kill you," Wade gasped, because he knew from watching the show, that he wasn't the one who ended this. He wasn't the prophecy. He wasn't Azor Ahai. He wasn't the prince that was promised. He was the audience, and the audience didn't get to deliver the final blow. but he could hold the line. "Arya," he screamed, and from the shadows of the Godswood, the long night ended with sunrise. Not the metaphorical sunrise of hope and renewal that stories usually provided when the darkness receded. A real sunrise, pale, cold, watery, filtering through clouds that had carried snow for weeks over a battlefield that looked like the world had tried to end, mostly succeeded. Winterfell's outer walls were breached in 4 places. The courtyard was a mass grave. The Godswood's weirwood tree had frozen cracks running through its trunk where the Night King's presence had pressed against the old god's magic. Steam rose from the ground where dragonfire had melted the snow, and in the steam, the living walked among the dead and tried to remember what silence sounded like when it wasn't the silence of 100,000 corpses falling at once. The cost was staggering. Half the Dothraki, or a third of the Unsullied. Thousands of northern soldiers, wildlings, Vale Knights, Riverlands men who'd marched north with Robb. Jorah Mormont died on the 2nd day, defending Daenerys from a wave of whites that breached Drogon's perimeter. Died as he'd lived, devoted and doomed and loving. A queen who would mourn him as the truest friend she'd ever known. Ed Tollett of the Night's Watch fell on the first night. Beric Dondarrion used his final life to hold a corridor for 30 seconds so that a group of children could escape the crypts. Theon Greyjoy charged the Night King's guard in the Godswood and died with a spear in his chest and redemption in his eyes. Wade sat against Winterfell's broken inner wall and stared at the sky and said nothing for a very long time. "I'm not going to do a bit," he said eventually. "I know that's what you expect. Fourth wall break, joke about the body count, reference a movie. Compare this to Avengers, Endgame. I'm not going to do it, because Jorah died 200 feet from where I'm sitting, and he was a good man, and he deserved better than a punchline." He pulled off his mask. The scarred, cratered face beneath, the face he hid from the world because the world had never been kind about it, caught the pale sunrise, and for once, he didn't comment on it. "The long night is over. The Night King is dead. Arya killed him, same as the original, which means that beat was a fixed point, which means the story knew what it was doing even when the show's pacing didn't. 3 days of war instead of 1 episode. Thousands of dead instead of a handful of named characters. So the existential threat treated as an existential threat, not a speed bump." He looked at his katanas. Dark steel, dragonglass veins, blood and ice crusted on the edges. "That's one fix. The long night, done right. Now comes the other one." The other one. King's Landing, Cersei. The bells. The march south began 2 weeks after the long night ended. Time enough to burn the dead. All of them, every corpse, because the living had learned what happened when you left bodies unburned and nobody wanted to learn that lesson again. Time enough to mourn. Time enough for Daenerys to stand over Jorah's pyre and weep with a grief that was the realest thing about her, more real than the titles and the destiny and the dragons. The grief of a woman who had lost the one person who had loved her without wanting anything but her safety. Wade watched her at the funeral. He watched her in the days after. He watched for the signs, the isolation, the paranoia, the hardening of a heart that had been cracked by too much loss. In the original timeline, this was where it started. Jorah's death, Missandei's capture and execution, Jon's rejection, the loneliness that calcified into rage that Cersei's bells couldn't penetrate. He'd changed some of it. Robb Stark was alive, which meant the North's politics were different, which meant Jon's position was different, but Jorah was still dead. The grief was still real, and Daenerys still had 3 dragons and an army, and a lifetime of believing that fire and blood were the tools of justice. He went to Tyrion first. "She's hurting." "I know. In the version I watched, nobody helped her. You tried, but you were too busy managing politics." Jon pulled away because of the Targaryen identity crisis. Missandei died and her last word was Dracarys, Dragonfire. and it was the last thing Daenerys heard from the person she loved most before she decided that burning was the answer to everything. Tyrion's face was grim. Missandei is alive in this timeline. She is. That's one pressure point relieved, but it's not enough. Daenerys needs people who tell her the truth, not people who tell her what she wants to hear. She needs to grieve Jorah without turning grief into rage. She needs to take King's Landing without burning it. And she needs someone to look her in the eye and say, "You can be better than your father." And that someone is you. That someone is everyone. You, Jon, Missandei, me, even Varys, who in the original timeline decided she was already lost and started plotting her assassination, which is the kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that Melisandre would appreciate. Wade leaned forward. We don't abandon her. That's the fix. Not a speech, not a magic solution. Just don't leave her alone with the fire. The march south took 3 weeks. Daenerys' combined forces, dragon-supported, battle-hardened, carrying the moral authority of having saved the world from the dead, approached King's Landing with overwhelming superiority. Cersei had the Golden Company. She had the Iron Fleet. She had wildfire caches and scorpion ballistas designed to kill dragons. But she didn't have hope. The woman Wade had confronted with Maggy the Frog's prophecy had changed. Not redeemed, not reformed, but rattled. And the certainty that had fueled her ruthlessness was cracked. She'd watched the prophecy unfold. Joffrey dead. Myrcella dead. Poisoned in dawn. Gold her shroud. Tommen still alive, but only because the Sept of Baelor still stood, because Cersei hadn't yet been pushed to the wildfire option, because the timeline's fractures had delayed her worst impulses without erasing them. King's Landing waited. The bells hung in their towers. The same bells that, in another version of this story, had rung surrender while a silver-haired queen on a black dragon decided that mercy was a luxury she could no longer afford. Wade found Daenerys the night before the assault. She was alone on a hill overlooking the city, Drogon sleeping behind her like a mountain made of scales and breath and the power to end everything below. "And I know what you told me," she said. She didn't look at him. "On Dragonstone, that I burned this city. In another timeline. In the timeline you came from, the story you watched." Now she looked at him. Violet eyes in the firelight. The Targaryen beauty and the Targaryen fire and the Targaryen madness all living in the same gaze. "You said I had a choice. You do. And if I choose wrong, if the fire is stronger than I am, then we stop you." He said it plainly, without comedy, without performance. "Tyrion, Jon, Arya, me, the people who fought beside you against the dead and will fight beside you for the living. We stop you. Not because we're your enemies, because we're the people who believe you're better than your worst impulse." Daenerys was quiet for a long time. The city glowed below. 500,000 people asleep in their beds. They were unaware that 3 dragons and an army stood on their doorstep, and that the distance between their survival and their incineration was one woman's decision. "I don't want to be my father," she whispered. "Then don't be." Morning came. The assault began. Drogon destroyed the Iron Fleet and the Scorpion batteries in a single pass that proved definitively that medieval anti-aircraft technology was insufficient against a dragon the size of a cathedral. The Golden Company broke against the Unsullied at the gates. Cersei's Lannister garrison, outnumbered and outmatched and led by a queen who had used fear as her only weapon, crumbled. The bells rang. The bells of King's Landing rang surrender. The same bells, the same sound. And so the same moment where another version of Daenerys had looked at a city that had taken everything from her family and decided to take everything back with fire. Daenerys sat on Drogon above King's Landing. She heard the bells. She felt the fire. Inside her, inside the dragon, the Targaryen inheritance that promised power and madness in equal measure. She saw the Red Keep where her family had ruled for 3 centuries before being torn down by rebels and usurpers in the endless churning machinery of the Game of Thrones. She could burn it. She had the power. She had the rage. She had the grief. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.